Well, Penn State got out of Indiana Memorial Stadium, where it's always interesting, with the win, and that was important.
Military Appreciation Week and the 67, 68, 69 teams that set the foundation for 50 years of Penn State football being honored.
Last year it took till the very last play to beat Iowa at Kinnick Stadium. We're ready from the very beginning for the blue-white tailgate.
And welcome to the Blue White Tailgate. Great to have you with us. Steve, Jay, Todd, and Penn State back home to take on Iowa in Beaver Stadium. Coming up on the show, we'll take a look at both teams. We'll hear from Trace McSorley, Amani Oruwariye, along with James Franklin. Also, later in the show, we'll talk in the final segment a little bit about targeting and that rule. We're going to get into that a little bit as well. All right, so much needed win. They go into Bloomington, as you mentioned, not the easiest place on the planet to play, before a friends and family crowd, some of which actually stayed to the end. But Penn State gets what they had to do.
They did, and you know, the family and friends that stayed, it was a little bit tighter at the end than we thought it would be. They had to sweat it out a little bit, but mission accomplished, right? They go to Bloomington, you get the victory, you get out of there. I kind of feel like any Big Ten road win is a good one, except maybe Illinois and Rutgers. You want to look a little bit more impressive. But hey, look, Indiana's a tough program. They play them tough. They got what they needed and got the heck out of there.
No question, and every win is good. I mean, ask Northwestern how good they feel about beating Rutgers, because had they lost that one, and they're 4-1 in the Big Ten, and they're still going. And this was a big win for Penn State to get this done. And you look at the history of the series, the average margin of victory at Indiana for Penn State was 8 points. So it's right in line with where they've been over the years.
All right, right in line with what we do is the PSECU update desk. Josh Sperber standing by there. Josh, what do you have?
Here is your pregame update, sponsored by PSECU. Before Saturday's game at Indiana, Jan Johnson was awarded a full scholarship by the Penn State football team. The redshirt junior had previously been a tight end on the scout team and originally was a preferred walk-on at Penn State. This year, he leads the team in tackles and has chipped in an interception as well. While it's a good beginning for Johnson, an ending for Trace McSorley as his FBS-long streak of 34 straight games with a touchdown pass came to a close against the Hoosiers. However, McSorley did chip in 2 running touchdowns in the win and became the 11th player in Big Ten history with 10,000 or more all-purpose yards over his career. He joins such Big Ten legends as Drew Brees and Antoine Randall L. and is the 3rd player to accomplish this feat in the last 3 seasons. We'll take a brief break from football and honor Nicolette Nolte, a Penn State freshman swimmer who was recently diagnosed with leukemia, her second form of cancer in the past 3 years. However, it's been heartwarming to see both the Penn State community and the NCAA community at large rally around her and post message of support on social media using the hashtag NikkiStrong. We here at WHVL pray for her speedy recovery and are too Nikki Strong.
Well done, Josh. Well said.
Really well done.
Appreciate that. We feel the same way Josh does. Everybody does. All right, this series with Iowa, let's take a look at the numbers. Has been a terrific series between the two guys, and Penn State's been able to get a little momentum in this series of late. So and last year was a great finish.
A little, yeah, exactly. A little too close, but
Yeah.
You had to stay for the end for last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things we talk about and we dissect those losses, those late losses. Well, you have to celebrate the late wins, too, and they got it done at Kinnick Stadium last year with the last play of the game, McSorley to Juwan Johnson. But it is interesting to see how close it's at Beaver Stadium, too, and Penn State only has an advantage of 7-6. So it's not like the Hawkeyes have come to Penn State and Happy Valley and just rolled over. I mean, they've been tough in their building.
Yeah, speaking of tough, that's Iowa. This is a situation where Trace McSorley knows it. It's time to play, quote, big boy football.
They're a hard-nosed team. You're not going to get an easy win out of those guys, and they're always going to come ready to play. They're going to fight. Coach Ferentz, he's probably one of the legendary coaches in college football with how many wins he has and how long he's been there and how successful he's been. He's always been successful. He knows how to win games, and he has a winning pedigree as a coach, and they have a winning pedigree as a program. So you're always going to get a hard-nosed game out of them. You're going to have to earn everything against them, and you're going to come out, sore, beat up, because they're going to be physical. So that's one of the things that they do really well on defense, and I think as a team in general, it's a hard smash-mouth football.
There's no question about that. It is all of that and more. But that's the next 3 weeks. That's the way it is. And this is what the three of us were talking before the show. I think that's what makes college football great in so many ways. There's so many different styles, Jay.
No question. And when you look at, you play Ohio State a couple weeks ago and they're throwing the ball all over the place. And then you play Michigan State and they're hammering the ball. And then you go to Indiana and they're all over the place. And now the next 3 weeks, you're going to be seeing fullbacks and tight ends and straight ahead north-south run game. And we'll talk about that in the film room. That presents real challenges when you don't see that in practice every day in your own practice fields.
And I think Trace touched on something really interesting. They're not going to give you anything. You have to earn everything you get against the Hawkeyes. They always bring a team and you sit there and go, well, who do they got? Roster-wise, talent-wise, maybe they're not quite as well. They got a bunch of Josie Jewels all the time, right? They just got guys that know how to play football. They assignment football, always in the right place at the right time. They just make you earn every inch of that field.
And that's the way it's always been. From Hayden Fry to Kirk Ferentz, they make you earn every inch on both sides of the ball. Coming up, we'll take a look at the Nittany Lion offense. They did enough last week to win it, as we continue with more after this. All right, so let's get into the offense. Guys, what did you think of the offensive performance and the rhythm they had?
It was Trace and a whole lot of Trace. I mean, he's unbelievable, this guy. Yeah. And, he'll do whatever it takes to win a football game. And that was nice to see him have running room again after being bottled up last week. It was good to see him have some running room. But, look, they got it done. They got into the 30s. Not as many touchdowns. They're a little bit less efficient in the red zone than they've been to start the year, but that was kind of expected. Did enough to win, I guess, right?
And I think the other thing, too, is that probably needs to be mentioned is the special teams really had a really good day with the kickoff returns. The opening kickoff, and then we'll talk about it later, the other long one. But I think when they had the score, they got it done.
Yeah. All right, so based on Todd's recommendation, Trace McSorley is going to be our Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Offensive Player of the Week, brought to you by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. 220 yards passing, 107 yards rushing, and a couple of touchdowns, including that one right there for Trace McSorley. His second career 100-yard rushing game. And for Thomas Allen, that was a tough moment at the 5-yard line because he had him dead to rights and couldn't finish him off.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what McSorley brings to the table, that dual threat. Look, Michael Robinson, Darrell Clark, as a play caller, that makes life different for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think the one concern you'd have is he's carried the ball 72 times in the last 4 weeks and played some pretty physical defenses. And as you look down the road with Iowa and Michigan, Wisconsin, I hope that Miles can carry more of that load than Trace does. I mean, that's the one thing I would hope.
His style of running, I mean, he can do it all. He's shifty. If he needs to beat the defender, he's also can run over guys, as we saw against Ohio State. So the guy can do it. But I don't know if we want to see, as you mentioned, Jay, this much running out of the quarterback.
All right, so let's get to the drive of the week that took place at Indiana on Saturday. All right, so here's Indiana. They kick it off. They're like, look, don't kick at the Hamler. Don't kick at the Hamler. Oh, good. Didn't kick at the Hamler. It's going to be Jonathan Thomas. Oh, wait a minute. He's at the 20. Oh, great. He's at the 40. Okay, the kicker's no issue. 40. Okay, we shouldn't have. We kicked it away from Hamler, didn't we? Yeah. And then Trace McSorley, saw he finished it off there. That kickoff return was something.
Well, and we're glad that Indiana has one of the worst kickoff coverage teams.
Well, they were 13th in the Big Ten heading into this game. They're 14th now.
I mean, Saquon Barkley started last year's game with a kickoff return for a touchdown, and then a couple of them in this game to start. The opening kickoff was a great kickoff return. So the Hoosiers really have trouble covering kicks, but what a phenomenal return, and the timing was fantastic of the return. Was great.
Look,
big boost.
Look, and we've been around teams, and being around teams, there's always that a few guys that they throw everything into it, and when they get the moment and they take advantage of it, it lifts an entire team up because of who it is. And it was Jonathan Thomas. He's that kind of guy.
Yep. And it shut the Indiana, the crowd that was there was starting to get into it. There was momentum, and that really shifted the momentum of that game, no question about it.
All right, no question it did. All right, let's get to the item that you guys were talking about, and I thought that was important, how many times Trace McSorley's carried the ball. James Franklin has talked about this, so let's hear from James first about whether or not there are other people that need to help out Trace McSorley and spread the wealth.
Yeah, I think in general, my concern right now is Trace is carrying too much of the load on offense. That's something that we need to do a better job of. We need more players, having a bigger impact on the game on offense. So that's probably my biggest concern.
Now let's nominate some people. Let's start with Miles Sanders. Can he be one of those guys that can do that?
I think he can definitely be one of those guys. And we were talking about before, especially in the passing game. You're going to try and run the ball against Iowa, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and you're going to run into a stone wall a lot. If you can use them out of the backfield, which they did on the first drive with a great efficiency and effectiveness, I think that's a really, really big plus. The other part of it is, Trace is not completing as many passes as he did in the past. His completion percentage is down low, and they are throwing the ball a lot on first down. Yeah. And if you're going to have almost half your passes incomplete, that means half the time you're almost starting on 2nd and 10. Yeah. And that really what are you supposed to do at that point? And he's having trust issues with some of the wide receivers. So those are some of the things that I see that are coming up, why he's tucking it under and running it so much.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. And if one of the things with a quarterback is there's you got to have confidence in the people you're throwing to. And they have, there's been drops. And I think you get to a point now where you start to say, well, should we be in 2 tight ends and 2 wideouts rather than 3 wideouts and 1 tight end? And you're starting to see some of that come into play a little bit with Penn State. So that's been different. And they've made some adjustments. But it's going to be critical that some other people do it because, you can take – it doesn't matter how good a player you are. They can do things to take certain things away that you want to do. And if teams do that, Penn State's going to have to find some other people to step up.
Miles Sanders, by the way, career high 53 yards receiving in that game against Indiana on Saturday. Let's check out the tail of the tape put together by our crack staff. Well, Iowa doesn't give up a lot, do they? Maryland, by the way, ran 39 plays, total.
Yes, the whole game.
Total.
Which is
last week,
insane
39.
Low number.
Terp's not doing the Nittany Lions any favors there.
Yeah, look, here's the bottom line. It's a hard team to take advantage of certain things, isn't it?
Well, they're very sound, and they play a very. If you look at Iowa's base defense in 1999 and 2005 and 2008 and 2018, their base lineup and their base approach is the same as it is now. Same thing on offense. So defensively, they are going to be very, very tough to get big plays against.
And Todd, only 37% right now on 3rd down for Penn State, which is something that you feel that personnel-wise they can be better than that.
Yeah, no doubt. And it starts with getting yourself on schedule a little earlier. Like I said, you got a lot of 2nd and 10s. They have a lot of tackles for losses, so you don't want to be in 2nd 12, 2nd and 13s. You want to be in those 2nd and 6s, 3rd and 2s, so you can do some different things and what you're doing. And Jay, you mentioned big plays are going to be tough to come by. I think they're going to need to hit some big plays. Yeah. The Tommy Stevens pass was a great play call. Things like that where you got to get some big plays against the Hawkeyes D.
All right. Well, the defense came up with some big plays, 3 takeaways in the game, plenty of sacks. We'll talk about that after this. All right, welcome back. We had a couple of choices, I think several choices for Defensive Player of the Week. Nick Scott had a fumble recovery, had an interception, his first career one. Yetur Gross-Matos had 10 tackles, 2 of them were sacks. We went with Shaka Toney, though. Shaka Toney's our Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Defensive Player of the Week because he came up with 4 sacks. When Indiana, everybody knew they had to throw the ball, so did Shaka Toney. I said, here he comes.
And some holding calls, too, which were big.
Yeah, big. And really he drew them.
Yeah, really big.
Look, you want to put guys, Jay, one of the keys to coaching, put guys in the best positions to succeed. For Shaka Toney, this is where he succeeds, rushing.
And he's really good coming off the ball. You look at his first 2 or 3 steps when they snap the ball on an obvious pass down. He is up the field and putting a lot of pressure on.
We talk about offense being about matchups. Defense is the same thing, too. Yeah. When you can get Shaka Toney on the end against a slow left tackle, someone that can't handle him, and he can speed rush him right around the end, you're going to create some serious havoc in the backfield.
And then there's Yetur Gross-Matos, 10 tackles, 2 sacks. And again, here's a guy who's going to play more snaps in the game than Tony will, so his wealth was spread out throughout the afternoon.
And we've been talking a lot about the defensive tackles like early in the year, and we need production out of the defensive ends. Well, here you go, right? Shaka Tony and Etor Gross-Matos, which is one of the more fun names to say, by the way. So I volunteer Etor Gross-Matos because you just want to say that name all the time. But it's great to see those guys step up the production around the end and make things a little bit tougher on the quarterbacks. And look, Nate Stanley for Iowa, he doesn't get on his back very often.
No.
So it's going to be important to get in his face, or to get some pressure on him quickly, because he doesn't hold on to the ball for long.
Area of concern, though, Indiana, not a great running team, ran the ball pretty well in the game.
Well, I thought schematically they did a nice job running north and south. In fact, got away from it probably too early, late in the game when they were down 12. But they were kicking out and running north and south and really had a lot of success there. And that's something that, if that continues this week, could be a real big problem.
We're going to talk about the Garrett Taylor play a little bit too later, but that play also really hurt Indiana when Penix went out with a knee injury. I mean, they were really moving the ball well on offense, and when he went out, because he was dangerous with his legs too, and they weren't afraid to throw the ball with Penix. So that was a pivotal play for both teams.
Well, Garrett Taylor did go out of the game. The key was he went out of the game in the third quarter, which means he's going to have to sit out the first half of this week's game against Iowa. So the man that is expected to step up is Jonathan Sutherland. Josh Sperber with a closer look at the man who now steps into the starting spot in the first half of this week's game.
Indiana marked Garrett Taylor's third straight game with a turnover. However, he was ejected for targeting in the third quarter. Jonathan Sutherland stepped in to replace him and did not disappoint.
I think he did well. He's a guy that's always had his head down and worked hard. Had a good camp, and we always prepare like the starters. So we always have that next man up mentality. So once Garrett went out, Sutherland was ready. He came up. He kind of leaned on me for support. I helped him out, and he played his butt off. So I think I was impressed.
Sutherland started off the season playing mostly on special teams, getting limited action with the defense against Pitt and Kent State. But he played most of the second half filling in for Garrett Taylor and did exceptionally well, including a forced fumble in the fourth quarter that set up Penn State's final touchdown. According to James Franklin, his progression made this moment inevitable.
GT will not be able to play the first half, so John will get a bunch of opportunities there, and is progressing nicely. He's got some real strengths. He is a downhill. You look at the play he caused the fumble on, that's kind of who he is. When he makes his mind up to go make a tackle, there's very little breakdown. Most guys, will come under control and shatter their feet and get their hips underneath them and then make the tackle. And with Sutherland, he's more like a missile. He just goes.
With Taylor sidelined in the first half against Iowa, there's another opportunity for Sutherland to prove that he can be an impact player.
No question, Josh. And Sutherland, out of Ottawa, Ontario, played then prep school. I went to high school in Virginia, and they recruited him. He's in there. The guy can tackle. As I mentioned, he's a downhill player.
Well, that's going to be important this week. I can tell you that much. How that, not just the running back, but those tight ends, and that's going to be something to watch for fans.
From Canada, he's got a hockey background, maybe.
He told me, big Ottawa Senators fan.
There you go. Maybe they like to hit. Anytime you're on the ice, they like to hit. So yeah, he looks good tackling for sure. And what Coach Franklin was talking about, how he just goes. You could see that in Josh's story there. You could see Sutherland. He did not hesitate. He just went right after.
Exactly.
Right after the ball carrier.
Iowa's had some efficiency through the air. Now Stanley's had three really big games, and then last week in the wind he threw for 86 yards. He's done well for them. He's only been sacked 6 times. But here's one of the big ones. They've converted 49% on third down.
Really, really good on third down, and that's something that is going to be important for Penn State. But that said, Penn State's defense, if you look at defensively, they've been very, very good on third downs. I think they're in the 37% range. So that'll be a matchup, and that'll be a key swing in this game because of Iowa's time of possession as well.
All right, so let's get to the tail of the tape between the two. Here we go. There's how the Penn State defense matches up with the Iowa offense. Good running numbers, very good passing numbers, and a shade under 400 yards total for Iowa this season. All right, so now let's get to Amani Oruwariye, and he gets back to the point we just made. One of the keys, winning third down, getting the defense off the field.
Yeah, it's important. Coach Franklin always says, the more we can get off on third down, the more the ball will be in the offense's hands, the more chance we have to score. And the more they score, the more they convert on third down, the less we're off the field, the better we feel, and then throughout the entirety of the game. So it's important. Third down is very important for us. So we definitely want to be better there.
In the last two games, the opponents had better than 16 minutes time of possession. Normally an irrelevant stat, but you want to keep your team fresh.
And how many plays?
189 plays.
That's waiting for you to say it. 189 plays.
Yeah.
That is a tremendous amount. So what Iowa likes to do is they like to stay on their schedule, right? We talk about scheduling, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2. So they get to convert a lot of those third downs because they're somewhat pedestrian on the first couple of downs. They're not looking for the big play right away. I'm interested to see what Coach Pry comes up with to get them off the field with third down. What kind of pressure packages, what kind of things that they do to confuse Stanley out there so they can get this defense off the field and get the O back on there.
No question.
Yeah. Iowa last week, by the way, had a drive against Maryland that covered 17 plays and knocked 9:04 off the clock. Now they got a field goal out of it, but still. All right, Jay has some intriguing numbers and some film coming up to back it up as we continue with the Blue White Tailgate after this.
It is time to go into the film room with Jay Paterno in his retro sweater. It was so popular, the homecoming sweater. He's now going retro. It is brought to you by Beer, Belly's Beverage, another fashion statement.
1994.
1994.
1994 Nike issue retro sweater.
1994. That was
Pretty good
before
year.
Kirk Ferentz at Iowa.
Yes.
Because he's been there 20 years. But what we're seeing here and what we're about to see, we've been seeing for about 20 years now.
Well, they've got a philosophy, and the best way to describe it is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And that's what they do. And so they've been effective over the years. But, this year a couple things are surprising. Let's take a look at a couple stats that are surprising. Number 1 in the country in kickoff returns. Number 10 in the fewest sacks allowed, which normally they've been a team that gave up sacks. 10th in time of possession and 11th in third down conversions, which is a really high number for them. A lot of things to look at. So
those numbers aren't in the Big Ten. That's in the country.
That's in the country, yes. Let's take a look at what they do defensively, because that's where Iowa starts everything. And one of the things that they've always done is they overshift you to the field. They force you to cut things back into the boundary, and they're really going to make you play the run game in this part of the field. This safety is going to come down, key number 2 receiver, and they're going to play run support with their corners. So take a look at how they do this. And again, here they're playing leverage. They force the cutback, and the backside end makes the play. They do that a ton. Now, when you get into your spread sets like Penn State will with trips, they're going to take their linebacker out in first and second down and play over the slot. And this safety becomes the run support guy, and he's very hard to account for in the run game with blocking. Now, that should open up a little play action pass that you've seen Hamler get in the end zone back there on that linebacker. But those those wide receivers are going to have to block linebackers. So take a look at how they line up against the trip set. Again, see how quickly that safety came downhill and got involved in making a play there. Now, some of the change-ups they have, they have changed some things since Kirk Ferentz got there. One of the things they do is they do a little bit of a robber-type coverage where they're going to bring the safety down again to be run support and send him out. But what that's going to give them the ability to do is it gives them an inside-out on the run-pass option to the slot receiver and take that away. It also gives them the safety a chance to come down and be a spy when Trace McSorley runs the ball. So take a look at how they do that with the secondary. Again, see that safety? They're playing zone. They stay there, and they got the underneath zones covered. They make the tackle, and they rally. They tackle very, very well. Now, when you get to third downs, you're going to get into a dime package. So they're going to go to a full 6 defensive backs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I can count to 6. I'm pretty impressed with myself. And then they're going to stun up front. And their defensive ends, as we've talked about, have been able to get to the quarterback and done a nice job. But, again, it gives them a different look. It means all your wideouts have to play against defensive backs, and they've got to take advantage of that. So take a look at here on the film. Again, they're coming down, and on this one, you see that safety comes down, helps on the backside guy in the back. You get a little blitz up front, and they change things up.
Offensively, do we need to know anything other than their tight ends or their leading receivers? I mean, that's the Hawkeyes, right?
Oh, no question. And they're going to run the ball. Their tight ends have combined, I think it's 51 catches for 735 yards or so and 9 touchdowns.
Both 6'5". You're going to have to climb these guys.
Big numbers. So let's take a look. They start with the run game. Let's take a look at what they do. And this is a great shot to really see what they do. They're going to run what we call an outside zone. This is their base run play. It's been their base run play since Kirk Ferentz got there in the last century, by the way. But they're going to take everybody is going to overreach, push this thing, create lateral displacement, and it's going to look like he makes an inside cut. But where he actually makes his cut once the play runs is going to be actually outside the tight end's actual alignment. They're going to move people along the line of scrimmage. So take a look at this from from first the sideline shot, and you see they get that push, they get that width, and now he's able to make that cut up underneath. And that's a real issue for Penn State because the run defense has been a problem the last couple of weeks. Now, take a look at some of the other things they do. Now they'll also do that same zone scheme, bring him back and kick out on the backside with a fake here on the jet sweep. And again, cutting back, take a look at this from the end zone shot. Again, they give you an unbalanced formation in the boundary, gives you lineup problems, and now there's the cutback underneath the tight end block and the wing block, and all of a sudden they're off to the races. Now, the one thing Iowa has done for years is the 3-level play-action pass game. It is a pain in the rear end because they give you one guy over the top, a second guy coming across, a guy in the flat becomes a very hard cover. Take a look, and they do it at a lot of different formations. Just take a look at this one. This is just a basic I formation. They come off that thing. Stanley stands back there, gets good protection. The deep guy is covered. The second-level guys, they're tough to cover. You see this from the end zone. You'll see a nice look at the 3 levels that they set up for you. Now you come back to another formation. Now a little bit different formation. 2 tight ends. Again, they're going to create the 3-level here with the backside tight end. This guy coming across and him in the flat. Same read. Take a look at this one now from the video here as well. Again, these are tight ends down the field, getting all the way across and going up against safeties and getting the ball. That's a 50-something yard play from your tight end. And last but not least, now they give you both tight ends next to each other. They move the wide out across. They get one, the high guy here. Here's your second-level guy. Here's your third guy. And as an added bonus, you get the back out of the backfield. So take a look at this one now. And again, this ends up being a touchdown for him. Big play for him in this game. You see they go to the top guy, over the top. And again, that's going to be a matchup issue for Penn State. Again, good shot here from the quarterback, how he sees it. That inside guy jumps the second-level guy, and there comes the first-level guy.
Penn State has a win against a ranked team. It's App State.
Yes.
They're in the AP. In order to get their second win against a ranked team, Iowa, number 18, as you've just diagrammed, it's not going to be easy. All right, we'll be right back on the Blue-White Tailgate.
Long. He's firing a home run ball, but Rich is wide open. It is caught.
Welcome back to Blue White Tailgate, and welcome to Shop Talk, presented by Ace Hardware of State College. On with us right now is Chuck Long, College Hall of Fame quarterback. Chuck, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on. Obviously, you're the guy that anyone wants to go to when they talk Iowa football, and as a legendary quarterback for the Hawkeyes, how do you break down this matchup between McSorley and Nate Stanley?
Well, you know, Trace McSorley is the straw that stirs the milk, obviously, for Penn State. And as Trace McSorley goes, Penn State goes at this point in time. Being that, you know, they have a younger football team at Penn State, and you know, they had to replace a lot of starters and a lot of skill from last year, and you know, 2 different type of quarterbacks. Trace McSorley is more of a run threat. Obviously, he has led the team in rushing in several games, and so he's more of a run threat, I believe, than Nate Stanley is. Very good passer. He has a great feel for the game. Knows when things break down. He knows he can escape and make a play with his feet. That's the danger. Big, strong kid, hard to bring down on the first tackle. Rocket arm. Nate Stanley has a stronger arm than Trace McSorley. You know, he has a 70-yard arm, so he's a very strong arm. Now, I think his accuracy suffers at times. Needs a little bit more touch on the ball at times, but has really developed into the style of quarterback that they want at Iowa.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be a great quarterback matchup. Certainly one of the keys to this game. But McSorley, in his last season with Penn State, thinking about going to the NFL next season, could you break down his potential as an NFL prospect?
I think, well, you got a guy like Drew Brees who's set every passing record now in the NFL. He reminds me of Drew Brees, and I do believe he'll have a shot at the NFL. I don't know if he'll be a real high draft pick at this point in time. I think there's prospects out there, but the kid's a winner, and look what he's done for Penn State in his career. And I know a coach is going to really like him when they draft him, but I think he's draftable, and I do believe he could have a nice career in the NFL. He's very smart. Again, he's one of those kids that because of he's such a winner and has that charisma that whoever he goes with, that coach is going to love him.
Definitely, and you've in your time at Iowa, you've played for one of the best coaches in the program's history. In your first year coaching with them, you coached with Kirk Ferentz, the coach right now. How do you compare those two coaches who've been with the program such a long time?
Well, you have two head coaches of 40 years of Iowa football, and I don't think anybody can say that right now. You know, it's just been the stability of it over 40 years. It's been remarkable. Hayden and Kirk are two different guys. They have their own two really different personalities, but at the same time, cut from the same cloth in terms of what Iowa is all about. Hayden was more of the marketer. You know, when he came in, he had flair and he wanted to market the school, and it was at the right time to bring in a head coach like Hayden Fry, and then it was the right time to turn it over to Kirk Ferentz after that. And Kirk has built his program in a different way, and it's been very special to watch, to be part of both of those coaches and how they've conducted themselves and in a really classy manner over 40 years. And I know Kirk has taken Hayden's blueprint, so to speak, and implement it with his own personality and his own touch. But there's a lot of Hayden Fry in the Kirk Ferentz program, and rightfully so. There's a lot of things that did not need to be fixed, and he kept those things in place. And then there's other things that needed to be fixed, and he fixed them. And so that's why he's lasted 20 years and has become the all-time winningest coach.
Yeah, and Ferentz has not done a great job beating Penn State of late, though. Penn State's won the last 4 games. What do the Nittany Lions need to do to make it 5 straight?
Well, you're asking a Hawkeye that. I think it all rests on the play of Trace McSorley. I mean, if he gets hot and can run the ball escape from the pocket, that will give Iowa some problems. They haven't really faced a quarterback like this yet this year with the ability of Trace McSorley and his escapability. Iowa has a really good front four on defense, though. They're really good, and they rush the passer well, and it's important that Iowa stays in their rush lanes to be able to contain him. But if they don't, and he breaks the pocket, look out, it could be a long day for Iowa. I think Miles Sanders is a key as well. I mean, how much they can get him going on the ground game is a key factor as well. But for Penn State, it's dealing with Iowa's offensive line and Iowa's defensive line. That's where it starts. And it's really Trace McSorley and Miles Sanders. And if Iowa can stop Miles Sanders, can they stop Trace McSorley?
Well, it's certainly going to be a battle, and one that we're excited to watch. Chuck, thank you so much for coming on our show today, and we've got more Blue White Tailgate for you after this.
All right, welcome back. And Iowa, of course, Kirk Ferentz is a guy that's put together a great career. We're going to take a look at his file as we go through this. But, everybody in this set respects him. He's accomplished a lot at a place that, someplace was not the easiest place to win all the time.
No question. And it's been consistency through the years, as we joked about earlier. You look at them schematically, and you look at the way, if you looked at their team now and you looked at it 20 years ago, you'd say very similar type of attack.
You do not stay anywhere for 20 years without doing some things right, and that just doesn't mean on the field as well. You have to be accepted into that community. You have to get along with everyone that is involved with Hawkeye sports and athletics and academics and those types of things. And so Kirk Ferentz has stayed there for 2 decades, and 60% of his games he's won. He's had some big years, had some not so mediocre years, but 20 years he's been there, a long time.
They do a great job at developing players. I remember going all the way back, Dallas Clark. Well, now he's got 2 more tight ends. He's got 2 more Dallas Clarks.
The one reminds me a little too much of Dallas Clark. I'm not real happy to see him showing up on Saturday.
These 2 guys, that's the key right there. The 2 tight ends are the top 2 receivers. They got 2 Dallas Clarks, and James Franklin says you got to be aware of where they are at all times.
Run first, set up the play action pass. Off of that. there are multiple personnel, 12, 21, 22, and 11. I think one of the things that's probably more challenging this year than in years past is when those two tight ends are on the field, they can line up in a two-back set, they can line up in a two tight end set, they can line up in a three wide receiver set, and this year they could line up in what we would term a spread set, like a four wide receiver set, but they're doing it out of 12 personnel.
And as a guy starts at quarterback and has time and has a little more experience under your belt, you expect him to improve. Nate Stanley's improved.
No question about it. And when you talk about those tight ends, that's a big part of it. Having guys like that to throw the ball is going to make you look good. And Nate, when you look at some of the games this year, he's made some plays with his feet that he did not make a year ago. He doesn't look like a guy that should be able to do that. But and that's one of the reasons you mentioned the lack of sacks. He's done some really good things there.
It's funny, isn't it, when we talk about the differences in programs, but you could take Iowa and probably put them in the red Wisconsin uniforms, or you could put them in the green Michigan State uniforms. You got Lewerke, Hornibrook, and Stanley, and you got kind of guys in the same kind of mold, right? They're shifty enough. I think the key for him on Saturday in the game is going to be how accurate will he be against Penn State. And that's usually a lot of times in Big Ten play anyway, when you're throwing into traffic and, you know, what are your receivers doing and that type of stuff. So for Stanley, he's going to be able to move around. Be nice to see some grass stains on his jersey if they can get to him. But if they don't, they got to get him off the field on third down, which we discussed before, and hopefully they do that with a little bit of pressure, and maybe he's a little inaccurate.
He had a good running game with Young, Martin, Sargent, the junior college player who didn't arrive on campus until July. It's really helped them out. Their offensive line's been terrific. They've protected him, and they've done a good job up front. They're physical.
Technically sound, too. I mean, that's just what you always find with them. Is their technique is great. Discipline on defense and their technique on offense. That's what you always find out of the Hawkeyes.
No question.
And there's something in, too, that he said their defensive front's been really good, and we're going to delve into that in a moment. And Trace McSorley says it's more than just talent. There's also length to deal with.
They both play with a really great motor. They're both good pass rushers, and they're strong and physical in the run game. And I think that's kind of a staple of a Big Ten defensive lineman and kind of what you want in a general defensive line, that they're going to get after the passer, but you're not really going to be able to move them in the run game. They're going to be stout, and they're strong, physical guys. They play with a great motor. They're both really athletic, and with their size and length, they create a lot of problems for you, and they do a really good job. As if maybe they're not getting the pass rush, get a hand up in the passing lane because of how tall they are.
They're just really good up front. And I'll tell you, Nelson's got great length. They are big on Parker Hesse, by the way, too. I mean, he's a real leader for them.
Well, Coach Franklin is in his 5th season, and he's played a lot of great against his teams have played against a lot of great teams. He is very, very complimentary of their defensive front line. He said it's one of the best that they've ever played against since he's been here. Very complimentary of this team.
Well, I think that's been critical to the success of their defense because they're inexperienced at linebacker. That's one area where they don't have a lot of experience, and those guys have, because of the strength up front, have allowed those guys to play and make a lot of plays.
I mean, in a lot of ways, they just open up holes for the linebackers to help them make plays because of how they play it. And then there's another part too. We talked about the number of plays that the Penn State defense has defended the last 2 weeks. Well, Iowa hasn't, 70-something plays?
104 total plays in the last 2 weeks.
104.
2 weeks. So they'll be fresh.
Yeah. I mean, 39 last week. Yeah. They weren't exactly exhausting in the shutout.
No, absolutely. And when you look at the Indiana game, they held Indiana to 65 plays.
And
really beat them.
The best Iowa teams that I've found through the years have had good secondaries. They haven't always had great secondaries and match up against wide receivers. And I think in this particular game, you're looking at the Nittany Lions wide receivers to step up. Who's going to make a play? Who's going to be there for Trace when he needs them? This is the game that you got to look at. Amani Hooker's a great player in the back, but I wouldn't say overall their entire depth in the secondary is fantastic. And so I think this is a game that Penn State's wide receivers have to step up. And not just catching the ball, guys, blocking as well. Blocking as well, because too many times they're getting beat back on a quick screen or that type of stuff. They've got to block better too.
Well, the matchup in the slot we talked about in the film room, they're going to be blocking linebackers on first and second down. That's going to be a big challenge.
There's no question. And Geno Stone, Jake Gervas to go with Amani Hooker. I mean, they've got some depth back there in that secondary. Pretty good players. But also at times, because of a couple of injuries, they've had a couple of freshmen starting at the corners. So that's an interesting dynamic in this game. Very talented players, though. All right. Good, bad, ugly keys to the game coming up as we continue after this. All right out of the gate, we get to the segment everybody loves and enjoys. We have so many letters and notes about it. The good, bad, and me. Okay, so Todd, you got the good.
I got the good. This one's easy. Boiler up. What a night for Purdue. Just fantastic all the way around. And of course, the student Tyler Trent that is battling cancer and predicted the win, and they featured him in so many ways. It was just a great, great night. And it's good for the Big Ten West as well. I mean, look, Purdue's in that running, guys. They got 4 teams at the top with only 1 loss. Things get really, really interesting in the Big Ten West.
Well, you look at the Big Ten West, they've split their crossover games with the East. So.
That's right.
Yep. But anyway, going to the bad, for our viewers in Philly, I'm going to go with Eric Reed calling Malcolm Jenkins of the Eagles a sellout. Yeah. Malcolm Jenkins has put his time, his effort, and his talents to making real positive change on the ground. And for Eric Reed, to call him a sellout, get out of here. Go do something like Malcolm Jenkins does. And Malcolm, I have tremendous respect for what he's done.
And by the way, one note on that, I thought Malcolm Jenkins' post-game handle was total class.
Yep.
Total class. My ugly goes to the targeting rule, and it's not just the rule itself. It's Garrett Taylor, yes, he's going to have to sit out the first half. I'd like to see an addendum to that rule where they allow the conference office to take a look at the play on a Sunday to see whether the players should be allowed to sit out the first half of the next game or not. Give it a little more leeway as to what intent is, because when you've got receivers and running backs leaning down into a play and then all of a sudden they get into the hit zone with the helmet, I think that's got to be looked at when it comes to the first half of the next game. I think that's too severe when you feel like there's no intent.
And you made that point before we started taping, but I think the other thing about it is you're under time constraints on game day.
That's right.
Let somebody really review it. And I think that's a great point, Steve.
All right, so let's get to the picks. Todd, you get out of the gate first. You got Wisconsin against the Rutgers survivor, Northwestern.
Ooh, I'm sticking with the Big Ten West, I guess. I like Wisconsin in this game to go on the road, and mainly because I heard Pat Fitzgerald talking after the game against Rutgers, and he just said they are just completely banged up. They were lucky to get out of there with the W to get back home. I think this is when the Badgers start to get rolling. I think they're going to go and win that game against the Wildcats.
All right, so you've got Washington State and Stanford.
I picked Oregon to win last week. I had not really looked at Washington State defensively. They are really good on defense. I don't think Stanford has enough offense. They have great blitz schemes, a lot of different things, and they're going to give Stanford all kinds of problems and win the game, I think.
All right, so Josh, you end up with South Florida, Houston. What do you have?
A big key for Houston against USF is Ed Oliver. He's one of the top defensive prospects in all of college football and was listed as questionable for the game earlier in the week. If he plays, I like Houston to make it 5 straight wins. Steve?
That's a good point, Josh, on Ed Oliver. I've got Florida and Georgia. I think they ought to start playing this game on campus. I know, but I'm going to go with Georgia. That's like a playoff game. That really is a playoff game.
So you think Georgia will come out of the biggest cocktail party in the world in good spirits?
Yes, yes. And I also think that it will be a finely tuned crowd down in Jacksonville. But I think like Alabama-Auburn, I think maybe they'll start playing that game on campus. Just a thought. I know it's a tradition, but, it's taking home games away to do it, but that's another thought.
Cocktails travel,
Yeah, yes, they do. Jay, what about your keys?
Well, I think for Penn State, can you be patient on offense? Because this is a defense. It's not going to give you easy plays. Can you be comfortable win this game 24-21 or 20-17 or whatever it may be? And if they do that, I think if they take what the defense gives them, they'll be fine.
I think my key is KJ Hamler. I'd like to see them use him the way that Purdue uses Rondale Moore, with the jet sweep if you need a first down late in the game, maybe a rub route to get him open to use his quickness and quick feet. When you're in the red zone, I think the key is to use KJ Hamler in this game effectively.
Yeah, and my Aaron's key to the week will be, I'll start with turnovers. I think giveaway, takeaway becomes important because I think you're going to need to shorten the field up. Saw last week that weather played a big role with the wind. Weather plays a big role here. Shortening the field is going to be a really important factor, I think, in this game, especially if the weather is what we think it's going to be. All right, for Josh, Todd, Jay, I'm Steve Jones. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the game tomorrow, and thanks for joining us on the Blue White Tailgate.